Then she stamped her little foot and said, "Be so mean if you want to. I know something that's going to happen. You just wait, and you will see. Hateful, hateful, hateful." And she flung out of the house with a new explosion of crying. Tom stood still, rather flustered by his onslaught. Presently he said to himself, "What a curious kind of a fool a girl is. Never been licked in school. Shucks, what's a licking? That's just like a girl. They are so thin-skinned and chicken-hearted. Well, of course, I ain't going to tell old Dobbins on this little fool, because there's other ways of getting even on her. That ain't so mean. But what of it? Old Dobbins will ask who it was tore his book. Nobody will answer. Then he will do just the way he always does. Ask first one and the other. And when he comes to the right girl, he will know it without any telling. Girls' faces always tell on them. They ain't got any backbone. She will get licked. Well, it's a kind of a tight place for Becky Thatcher, 'cause there ain't any way out of it. Tom calmed the thing a moment longer, and then added, "All right, though, she would like to see me in such a fix. Let her sweat it out." Tom joined the mob of skylarking scholars outside. In a few moments the master arrived, and school took in. Tom did not feel a strong interest in his studies. Every time he stole a glance at the girl's side of the room, Becky's face troubled him. Considering all things, he did not want to pity her, and yet it was all he could do to help it. He could get up no exultation that was really worth the spelling book discovery was made, and Tom's mind was entirely full of his own matters for a while after that. Becky rose up from her lethargy of distress and showed good interest in proceedings. She did not accept that Tom could get out of his trouble by denying that he spilled the ink on the book himself, and she was right. The denial only seemed to make the things worse for Tom. Becky supposed she would be glad of it, and she tried to believe she was glad of it, but she found she was not certain. When the worst came to the worst, she had an impulse to get up and tell on Alfred Temple, but she made an effort and forced herself to keep still. "'Cause," said she to herself, "he will tell about me tearing the picture, sure. I wouldn't say a word, not to save his life." Tom took his whipping and went back to his seat, not at all broken-hearted, for he thought it was possible that he had unknowingly upset the ink on the spelling book himself in some skylarking bout. He had denied it for form's sake and 'cause it was custom, and had stuck to the denial from principle. A whole hour drifted by. The master sat nodding in his throne. The air was drowsy with the hum of study. By and by, Mr. Dobbins straightened himself up, yawned, then unlocked his desk and reached for his book, but seemed undecided whether to take it out or leave it. Most of the pupils glanced up languidly, but there were two among them that watched his movements with intent eyes. Mr. Dobbins fingered his book absently for a while, then took it out and settled himself in his chair at Becky. He had seen a hunted and helpless rabbit look as she did, with a gun leveled at its head. Instantly he forgot his quarrel with her. Quick, something must be done. Done in a flash too. But the very imminence of the emergency paralyzed his invention. Good. He had an inspiration. He would run and snatch the book, spring through the door, and fly. But his resolution shook for one little instant, and the chance was lost. The master opened the volume. If Tom only had the vested opportunity back again. Too late. There was no help for Becky now, he said. The next moment the master faced the school. Every eye sank under his gaze. There was that in it which smote even the innocent with fear. There was silence while one might count 10. The master was gathering his wrath. Then he spoke. Who tore this book? There was not a sound. One could have heard a pin drop. The stillness continued. The master searched face after face for sign of guilt. Benjamin Rogers, did you tear this book? A denial. Another pause. Joseph Harper, did you? Another denial. Tom's uneasiness grew more and more intense under the slow torture of these proceedings. The master scanned the ranks of boys, considered a while, then turned to the girls. Amy Lawrence, a shake of the head. Gracie Miller, did you do this? Another negative. The next girl was Becky Thatcher. Tom was trembling from head to foot with excitement and a sense of the hopelessness of the situation. Rebecca Thatcher. Tom glanced at her face. It was white with terror. Did you tear? No. Look me in the face. Her hands rose in appeal. Did you tear this book? A thought shot like lightning through Tom's brain. He sprang to his feet and shouted, I done it. The school stared in perplexity at this incredible folly. Tom stood a moment to gather his dismembered faculties, and when he stepped forward to go to his punishment, the surprise, the gratitude, the adoration that shone upon him out of poor Becky's eyes seemed pay enough for 100 floggings. Inspired by the splendor of his own act, he took without any outcry the most merciless flogging that even Mr. Dobbins had ever administered, and also received with indifference the added cruelty of a command to remain 2 hours after school should be dismissed. For he knew who would wait for him outside till his captivity was done, and not count the tedious time as lost either. Tom went to bed that night planning vengeance against Alfred Temple, for with shame and repentance Becky had told him all, not forgetting her own treachery, but even he longing for vengeance had to give away soon to pleasanter musing, and he fell asleep at last with Becky's latest words lingering dreamily in his ear. Tom, how could you 21. Be so noble? Vacation was approaching. The schoolmaster, always severe, grew severer and more exciting than ever, for he wanted the school to make a good showing on examination day. His rod and his ferule were seldom idle now, at least among the smaller pupils. Only the biggest boys and young ladies of 18 and 20 escaped lashing. Mr. Dobbin's lashings were very vigorous ones too, for although he carried under his wig a perfectly bald and shiny head, he had only reached middle age, and there was no sign of feebleness in his muscle. As the great day approached, all the tyranny that was in him came to the surface. He seemed to take a vindictive pleasure in punishing the least shortcomings. The consequence was that the smaller boys spent their days in terror and suffering and their nights in plotting revenge. They threw away no opportunity to do the master a mischief, but he kept ahead all the time. The retribution that followed every vengeful success was so sweeping and majestic that the boys always retired from the field badly worsted. At last, they conspired together and hit upon a plan that promised a dazzling victory. They swore in the sign painter's boy, told him the scheme, and asked his help. He had his own reasons for being delighted, for the master boarded in his father's family and had given the boy ample cause to hate.
On a visit to the country in a few days, and there will be nothing to interfere with the plan. The master always prepared himself for great occasions by getting pretty well fuddled, and his sign painter's boy said that when the dominie had reached the proper condition on examination evening, he would manage the thing while he napped in his chair. Then he would have him awaken at the right time and hurried away to school. In the fullness of time, the interesting occasion arrived. At 8 in the evening, the schoolhouse was brilliantly lighted and adorned with wreaths and festoons of foliage and flowers. The master sat thrown in his great chair upon a raised platform with his blackboard behind him. He was looking tolerably mellow. 3 rows of branches on each side and 6 rows in front of him were occupied by the dignitaries of the town and by the parents of the pupils. To his left, back of the rows of citizens, was a spacious temporary platform upon which were seated the scholars who were to take part in the exercises of the evening. Rows of small boys, washed and dressed to an intolerable state of discomfort, rows of groggy big boys, snowbanks of girls and young ladies clad in lawn and muslin and conspicuously conscious of their bare arms, their grandmother's ancient trinkets, their bits of pink and blue ribbon, and the flowers in their hair. All the rest of the house was filled with the non-participating scholars. The exercises began. A very little boy stood up and sheepishly recited, "You would scarce expect one of my age to speak in public on the stage," accompanying himself with the painfully exact spasmodic gesture with a machine might have used, supposing the machine to be a trifle out of order, but he got through safely, though curiously scared, and got a fine round of applause when he made his manufacture bow and retired. A little shamefaced girl lisped, "Mary had a little lamb," performed the compassion-inspiring courtesy, got her meed of applause, and sat down.
Tom Sawyer stepped forward with conceited confidence and soared into the unquenchable and indestructible "Give me liberty or give me that" speech, with fine fury and frantic gesticulation, and broke down in the middle of it. A ghastly stage fright seized him. His legs quaked under him, and he was like a chalk. True, he had the manifest sympathy of the house, but he had the house's silence too, which was even worse than its sympathy. The master frowned, and this completed the disaster. Tom struggled a while and then retired, utterly defeated. There was a weak attempt at applause. but it died early. The book stood on the burning deck, followed. Also the Assyrian came down, and the other declamatory games. Then there were reading exercises and a spelling fight. The meagre Latin class recited with honor. The prime feature of the evening was in order. Now, original compositions by the young ladies. Each in her turn stepped forward to the edge of the platform, cleared her throat, held up her manuscript tied with dainty ribbon, and proceeded to read, with elaborate attention to expression and punctuation. The themes were the same that had been illuminated upon similar occasions by their mothers before them, their grandmothers, and doubtless all their ancestors in the female line, clear back to the Crusades. Friendships was one, memories of other days, religion in history, dreamland, the advantages of culture, forms of political government, compared and contrasted, melancholy, filial love, heart longings. A prevalent feature in these compositions was a nursed and petted melancholy. Another was a wasteful and opulent sketch of fine language. Another was tendency to log in by the ears particularly prized words and phrases until they were worn entirely out, and the peculiarity that conspicuously marked and marred them was the inveterate and intolerable sermons that wagged its crippled tail at the end of each and every one of them. No matter what the subject might be, a brain-raking effort was made to squirm it into some aspect or other that the moral and religious mind could contemplate with edification. The glaring insincerity of these sermons was not sufficient to compass the banishment of the fashion from the school, and it's not sufficient today. It never be sufficient while the world stands perhaps. There is no school in all our land where the young ladies don't feel obliged to close their compositions with the sermons, and you will definitely that the sermon of the most frivolous and the least religious girl in the school is always the longest and the most relentlessly pious. But enough of this. Homely truth is unpalatable. Let us return to the examination. The first composition that was read was one entitled, "Is This Then Life?" Perhaps the reader can endure
in the common walks of life.
With what delightful emotions does the youthful mind look forward to some anticipated scene of festivity, imagination busy sketching rose-tinted pictures of joy. In fancy, voluptuous, watery of fashion sees herself amid the festivity throng, the observed of all observers. Her graceful form, arrayed in snowy robes, is whirling through the mazes of the joyous dance. Her eye is brightest, her step is lightest in the gay assembly. In such delicious fancies time quickly glides by, and the welcome hour arrives for her entrance to the Elysian world, of which she has had such bright dreams. How fairy-like does everything appear to the enchanted vision. Each new scene is more charming than the last, but after a while she finds that beneath this goodly exterior all is vanity. The flattery which once charmed her soul
now grates harshly upon her ear. The ballroom has lost its charms, and with wasted health and embittered heart, she turns away with the conviction that earthly pleasure cannot satisfy the longings of the soul. And so forth and so on. There was a buzz of gratification from time to time during the reading, accompanied by the whispered ejaculation of "How sweet! How eloquent! So true!" And after the thing had closed with a peculiarly affliction sermon, the applause was enthusiastic. Then arose a slim, melancholy girl whose face had the interesting paleness that comes of pills and indigestion, and read a poem, 2 stanzas of
Maidens, farewell to Alabama. Alabama, goodbye, I love thee well, but yet for a while do I leave thee now. Said yes, said thus, of you my heart doth swell, and burning recollections throng my brow, for I have wandered thus the flowery woods, have roamed and read near Talaposa's stream, have listened to Thalas's whirring floods, and wooed on Caucasus side Aurora's beam. Yet shame I not to bear on awful heart, nor blush to turn behind my tearful eyes. 'Tis from no stranger land I now must part. 'Tis to no strangers left I yield these sighs. Welcome, and home were mine within this state, whose veils I leave, whose pyres fade fast from me, and cold must be my eyes, and hard, and tete, when, dear Alabama, they turn cold on thee. There were very few there who knew what tete meant, but the poem was very satisfactory nevertheless. Next appeared a dark, complexioned, black-eyed, black-haired young lady, who paused an impressive moment, assumed a tragic expression, and began to read, in a measured, solemn tone, a vision. Dark and tempestuous was night. Around the throne on high not a single star quivered, but the deep intonations of the heavy thunder constantly vibrated upon the
lightning
air.
revealed an angry mood through the cloudy chambers of heaven, seeming to scorn the power exerted over its terror by the illustrious Franklin. Even the boisterous winds unanimously came forth from their mystic home, and blustered about as if to enhance by their aid the wildness of the scene. At such a time, so dark, so dreary, for human sympathy my very spirit sighed, but instead thereof, my dearest friend, my consoler, my comforter and guide, my joy in grief, my second bliss in joy, came to my side. She moved like one of those bright beings pictured in the sunny walks of fancy's Eden by the romantic and young, a queen of beauty unadored save by her own transcendent loveliness. So soft was her step, it failed to make even a sound, and but for the magical thrill imparted by her genial touch, as other unobstructive beauties, she would have glided away unperceived, unsought. A strange sadness rested upon her features, like icy tears upon the robe of December, as she pointed to the contending elements without, and bade me contemplate the two beings presented. This nightmare occupied some 10 pages of manuscript and wound up
with a sermon so destructive of all hope to non-Presbyterians that it took the first prize. This composition was considered to be the very finest effort of the evening. The mayor of the village, in delivering the prize to the author of it, made a warm speech in which he said that it was by far the most eloquent thing that he had ever listened to.
Daniel Webster himself might well be proud of it. It may be remarked, in passing, that the number of compositions in which the word beauteous was over-fondled, and human experience, referred to as life's page, was up to the usual average. Now the master, mellowed almost to the verge of geniality, put his chair aside, turned his back to the audience, and began to draw a map of America on the blackboard, to exercise the geography class upon, but he made a sad business of it with his unsteady hand, and the smoother titter rippled over the house. He knew what the matter was, and set himself to write it. He sponged out lines and remade them, but he only distorted them more than ever, and the tittering was more pronounced. He threw his entire attention upon his work, now as if determined not to be put down by the mirth. He felt that all eyes were fastened upon him. He imagined he was succeeding, and yet the tittering continued. It even manifestly increased, and well it might. There was a garret above, pierced with a scuttle over his head, and down through the scuttle came a cat, suspended around the haunches by a string. She had a rag tied about her head and jaws to keep her from mewing. As she slowly descended, she curved upward and clawed at the string. She swung downward and clawed at the intangible air. The tittering rose higher and higher. The cat was within 6 inches of the absorbed teacher's head. Down, down, a little lower, and she grabbed his wig with her desperate claws, clung to it, and was snatched up into the garret in an instant with her trophy still in her possession. And how the light did blaze abroad from the master's bald pate, for the sign painter's boy had gilded it. That broke up the meeting. The boys were avenged. Vocation had done.